Welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you here for this Lead Time Live panel on running remote teams. Let me make sure my microphone is set up correctly. So today we'll be covering topics like what async and sync touch points you should use to or set up so that you can know what's going on and how people are doing on your team, and also what you should be paying attention to monitor team health and things like that. So this panel will last about an hour, and I'll try to reserve some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions during the panel, please drop them into the Q&A feature directly on Zoom. So let's dive in. I'll be sharing my screen and running this panel through Range's meeting tool, which makes it super easy to facilitate and keep meetings and panels on track. Ryan, one of our coworkers, will be taking notes for us, and those will be sent out afterwards in a follow-up email. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Cool. So this is everyone. Ryan at Dennard is absent, so he wouldn't show up in the meeting tool, but he will be available to take notes. So let's start off with an opening round. I like to kick meetings and panels off with an opening round, just to kind of give everyone a chance to talk and see how people are doing. So our prompts for the opening round are just introduce yourself. Who are you? How are you doing today? And then also, what's something unexpected that you've learned through your experience of running remote teams? So let's see who's first. Oh no, let me refresh this. All right, Ellen, you're up.
Oh my God, this is so much fun. I'm just like, this is amazing. Sorry, this is my first time seeing this. I'm like, what? You know how many times I've been in a Zoom meeting where who's next? And there's that awkward silence. And this, oh my God. Sorry, mind blown. Right, so introduction. So hi, I'm Ellen, Director of Engineering at Calm. I manage B2B and platform teams there. How I'm doing today, I actually just came back from a gym session, and I'm really glad that we're doing this remotely, so nobody here can experience this aroma. But what is something that's unexpected that I've learned through experience of running remote teams? I think that what surprised me was like in two folds. First, it was when we started going into working remotely since the start of the pandemic. I was really surprised by how easy it is for the team to switch to remote and stay productive. It almost felt like work never was interrupted or hurt in productivity in any way. And then so we thought we were good. And then I think fast forward maybe like 9 months, a year into working remotely, what also caught me by surprise was while work wasn't suffered, team culture and morale and the togetherness, like that actually suffered, and that creeped up on us. And also like, how hard it is to manage remote teams. So like, those are the two things that surprised me. So
I'll click it.
You'll click it, okay. It's so exciting.
I'm glad it's delightful for you. All right, Jen, go for it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen. I'm one of the founders of Range, which is behind this meeting tool that we're using to facilitate the panel today. I am doing pretty well today. I got up early this morning for physical therapy, so feeling, somewhat productive. Something unexpected I learned through the experience of running remote teams. I was surprised how well I've gotten to know teammates that I've never met in person. So I think a lot of folks have had the experience of onboarding new hires during the pandemic. And I recently met up with one of our teammates, Ryan, who's taking notes today for a hike. And I'd never met him in person for, like a year and a half or so. And I just felt so normal. Like I was like, oh, I know you, even though we'd never met in person. And so that's been a really pleasant surprise through some of the things we'll discuss today that we've done at Range to help build connection over time that it can work.
Thanks, Jen. Nassim.
Hi, I'm Nassim, engineering manager at Elastic. I work with the CI, continuous integration and continuous delivery teams. Doing pretty great today. It's almost the end of the day for me, 6 p.m. here in France, where I'm currently based. And one thing unexpected, that came from one of my colleagues that coined it as working asynchronously as latency. And for once, it's like not a bug, it's actually a feature. And I think really embracing and using that latency to our advantage can really help projects where we can leverage everyone's attention at the time that is convenient for them towards delivering, really getting into the zone, reducing context switching and so on. My team is fully distributed around the globe, so we can very rarely meet all at once for a 1 hour meeting. I'll talk more about it maybe later, but really embracing that latency has been useful.
Thanks, Nassim. Me, I'm Jean. I'm the VP of Engineering at Range. Today I'm doing pretty good. I've been really, I haven't really been a person who has a regular like exercise practice, but the last few weeks I've been doing yoga with Adrian on YouTube, and I think it's sticking. Like I'm basically doing it every day, even if it's just 8 to 10 minutes. So I'm pretty pleased with that. And then something unexpected I've learned, well, I guess I had one in mind, but I just lost it. Well, I'll add a silly one, which is I've been surprised at people's heights once I meet them. Like I kind of have a sense of, I guess I kind of guess at how tall people are when I see them in Zoom, and then if it matches, then I'm not surprised. But sometimes it's like way off, like by half a foot or something, and both ways. And so that's been definitely surprising. And Miriam.
Okay, so Jean, can you guess my height?
Okay, well, I think because you asked that, I'm gonna assume it's unexpected. So maybe like 6 foot. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I would be a WNBA star if I was 6 feet. But no, I'm 5'4". I thought that was an interesting point, though. I never thought about that. So my name is Miriam DeAna, and I'm in Atlanta, and I'm doing pretty well. I had a bit of as far as the spinning thing, it makes me anxious because I don't know if I'm going next or not. So not the same delight that others have. But I had some contractors in the home this morning that was supposed to be done at 11 and didn't get done on time. It was a lot. So I'm feeling a little anxious, but I'm calming down. I'm outside. The weather is awesome. Something unexpected that I learned, similar to what someone else said, the first, 6 to 9 months, it was surprising at how well everyone was doing and how much work was getting accomplished. But I found that a lot of introverts, including myself, suffered in a way that was unexpected, meaning we're normally around people all day and then we come home and decompress. But now we're not around people all day, and especially those who were living alone, not with family, not with partners, maybe just with pets. Even though they're introverts, and even though I'm an introvert, I was missing some of that interaction that I thought I would revel in. So that's something that, in my experience, was unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing. One thing we sometimes do is just like, we'll say, okay, Miriam, you're up. And then as you're talking, we'll spin it. So the next person knows that it's their turn. So you don't get that like, oh God, now I'm on the spot. Okay, cool. So let's dive into the discussion topics. I've kind of curated some here based on what I think is interesting, what people said they wanted to learn from the panel. So let's just start off with high-level approaches, right? With remote teams, you don't get some of that ambient context that you would get walking around an office, of just how people are doing, how projects are progressing. So at a high level, like what's your approach to knowing what's going on, both for the work and people, without micromanaging? And see, maybe you can kick us off here.
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's been a lot of work on setting expectations up front with everyone and the rules of engagement. So we make it clear what is to be done, and how do everybody feel like engaging and reaching out. And from there, we go from there. We establish a practice of stand up on GitHub discussions with being really context heavy and pretty detailed. And that's usually helpful and sufficient to keep track of what's happening. When that doesn't quite work, I do a lot of work with in one-on-ones of really helping folks understand why it's important to share that context and how it's helpful. For example, if someone stays silent as a manager, I don't know if everything is great and they're having a very productive day, or if they are deep in a rabbit hole, or they're stuck, or something bad at home happened. And that can be stressful for me and for other folks on the team. So really explaining that it's not about judging, it's more about being really transparent there.
Mm-hmm.
And finally,
like leaning into explicitness and expectations.
Exactly. And I would close by saying leading by example and modeling the behaviors we want to see. That's pretty standard, not really remote specific, but even more so around oversharing, really communicating, providing the context, and then reacting with emojis and likes and positive reinforcement and so on. Yeah.
It seems silly, right? Like a little emoji, but in the absence of it, you don't know if anyone's seen anything that you've done. So it can be really useful. Any other kind of high level approaches people have taken or mindsets to knowing what's going on without micromanaging?
I like what Nassim said about clear expectations and being explicit about those. I think whenever we encourage, I guess just make space and normalize regular updates, it doesn't feel like a task or like micromanaging, but we all are giving updates. So that's from management, upper leadership, anyone who's working on something, making sure that regular updates becomes a part of the environment that's expected. And then it's not, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Because you're getting that information on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. So setting up the system so that you're not having to poke your head in and check in with people.
And then another thing, as far as one-on-ones, mine have morphed quite a bit. Even at my last company before I started at PathStream, I seem to need more time in one-on-ones. So whereas before I might stick strictly to general family life, work balance, and talk some more about career development and then about how they're growing at the company, I started shifting to adding more meetings and adding more time just to shoot the breeze, just to get a sense of where someone is, how things are going, even if I have to pair it up just because of my time. So having two-on-ones, I guess, instead of one-on-ones where we're just chatting about life, I think that can help as well.
Nice.
Yeah, I think, a lot of great points been made. I definitely big +1 on the creating a system where the things that you need to know is like proactively being posted. So it might be sort of like cross team, every other week, some form of update or blockers. It could be roadmap items or like having access to like the Jira board to see like where the teams are at. I think the productivity side of things hasn't been as much of an issue that I want to keep track of. And I more so want to understand, like, what is the team health? Are people, feeling safe? Are they able to ask for help when they need it? Is the team cohesive and productive and happy? And so the way that I check in is a few things. Like one, sometimes I would like peek into the team channel and see like, what is the vibe there? Are people asking questions? Are they willing to, sound dumb? Are they willing to like share? Like that's the kind of thing that I look for. Or is the channel like crickets, right? That's a sign of like, oh, not sure how the team's doing. And one level worse would be, are there like conflicts or like defensiveness or condescending like conversations, that sort of thing. So absent of that. And I think another thing that I've started doing as well is to create more space for people to ask me anything. So that's something where like, like when they ask me things, what do they ask? So I would create these AMAs every now and then with each of the sub teams. And yeah, oftentimes if they're asking really serious question, like if there's a lot of fear in their question, then it's like, okay, team health is subpar. But if they're asking actually, pretty silly questions, then I know that they're probably doing fine. Yeah, so that's how I keep tabs on them.
That leads us really well into this next topic. And Jen, maybe you can start us off here, but like, there's so many things as a manager, there's so many things to keep track of, even in a non-remote setting, right? Like it can be kind of overwhelming of like people, process, projects, and career development, like all the things you want to keep track of. But you get some of that in an in-person office. When we go to a remote teams, some of that kind of becomes a little bit blurry without a bit of intention and process behind it. And so I'm curious, like, what do you find, like, Ellen, you mentioned a little bit of this, but like, what do you find most important to stay on top of, right? Like there's so many things and you can't keep track of all of them. So I imagine there's like a few things that you're like, okay, these are the things I need to watch out for if there's any like flags or, people are having conflict in Slack teams. Maybe Jen, you could start us off here. And also if you have any comments on the previous topic.
Yeah, I think like, I really liked kind of what several folks said about just kind of establishing this like cadence or habit of checking in, whether that's through one-on-ones or through kind of project updates, and normalizing that that's not just a reporting up mechanism, it's for the whole team. I think as Ellen was saying, like one of the most important things we check in on at Range and what we see with the teams that we work with at Twitter and Airbnb and folks is around team health and being able to monitor that. And one of the challenges we see is for scaling that, because you can't have 10 one-on-ones every day and if you want to do any other work. And so often what we have tried to normalize is checking in on both work and how you're feeling asynchronously, whether that's sharing kind of a simple mood emoji of like red, yellow, green, this is how I'm feeling. And that's kind of part of what's built into the Range product. But now, for instance, if I share a red emoji, like Jean will Slack me and be like, everything okay? Because it signals that like, maybe I'm struggling a bit today. But I'd say like combining basically a check-in on how folks are doing, both as individuals, but also the holistic team. Because 3 people feeling a little bit stressed might not be a big deal unless it's 3 out of your 5 teammates. And it's like, okay, that's actually the majority of the team and it may be related to the work that we're doing. The other thing I like to think about is just kind of the main focus that people are doing. So instead of being like, okay, what are the 10 things you're working on today? Can you tell me in great detail? Just being like, okay, what's your priority this week? What's the main thing you're trying to get done? And helping encourage people to set that as a healthy habit for themselves, but also making it easy for others to see it. Because then I, as a leader, have the ability to be like, cool, based on the projects I think we're doing, and if these are people's main priorities this week, those are not aligned. Like everyone's working on this, but we said we were going to finish this by Thursday. Or like, sweet, everyone's doing everything, I don't have to do anything, which is a great scenario. So it's kind of like the top items are like general sentiment and general focus, but not as kind of much in the weeds.
This is really embarrassing. I need to find my charger to plug in my laptop, and maybe one of you guys can continue. Any other?
Nothing surprises me anymore when it comes to remote work. That's amazing.
I'm gonna leave one of you to keep going. I'll be right back.
Happy to continue. So definitely like +1 on a lot of that. I think that as I started, like now a lot of times not managing individual contributor directly, managing through managers, there's a lot of like, relying on the leaders to drive their, their own team and make sure the team health is good. Where I do like kind of spot check is like every other week they do a retro. So like I would like go into the retro doc and see, oh, is there something that is like, obviously terrible that needs to be addressed right away. And I think another thing that I try to keep in mind is like, are they seeing different problems or is the same problem coming up over and over again? Right. And this is both from the team servicing them and also from the stakeholders of the team. Like, are they having the same complaint? Because it might be something where like the team itself can't solve and I do have to step in. So those are the 2 things I definitely prioritize and keeping an eye on.
I can go next. For me, I found that folks obviously enjoy delivering and shipping stuff, and usually it really correlates to when they can get into the flow, into the zone, and really in a distraction-free environment. And you would think that we work remotely and we can get that for free, and it's actually almost the opposite with all of the Slacks and the notification, and depending on how you set up in the company, it can be overwhelming, like GitHub notifications like, for days. So really doing a lot of coaching work and asking them and working with them to craft those windows of uninterrupted time where they can get in the zone, get those 2 hours in the mornings before checking emails, for example, and feeling good about their work by midday already, and then the afternoon can be wasted. Doesn't matter because they feel good about it. And so I would have those sessions where we do some coaching, we do it for a few weeks, and they do great, and then it starts going south again, and then we work again together on it, and that usually gives me a good gauge of where are they at. So that's one technique I've used. And the other one is I would ask pretty regularly in my one-on-ones, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you feel on autonomy, mastery, and purpose? So those are like the 3 metrics that Daniel Pink talk about in his book Drive, around what makes employees feeling engaged. And they say, for example, they would say, oh, I feel 6 around purpose or 5 around mastery. And that's what I would dive in onto the lowest metrics and say, okay, what would it take to go from a 5 to a 6? What does it look like? And then take it from there. So I find that monitoring week after week on those 3 metrics can really help detect when issues pop up.
Nice. All right, I'm back and I have power, and I'm glad my MacBook informed me of that it was about to die. All right, let's move on. A common challenge that I hear with managers who are newly managing remote teams is around team engagement. And I think this is kind of a tricky question because sometimes it's like, in meetings, or like, how do I keep people engaged? And it's a little bit less about, oh, this person is unengaged, not disengaged, and more about like, they're not providing enough context or alignment with the purpose. But let's keep it framed as this. And so, Ellen, I was hoping you could start us off of just like, what's worked for you in general, both in meetings and then just working remotely in keeping people engaged on the team.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think like before I even go into the things that I've tried is that one, we do have to kind of reset our expectations. Like if you're remote, things are just harder, right? It's like if you're trying to have a party on Zoom, it takes a little bit more to get it going than like in person, where you can like, do a high five or fist bump. So I think there is the expectation that it is different. But you can get there, you can still get there. Let's talk about like team engagement. So in general, when you're not in the common space, you can't like, have a smile or not when people are, showing up and doing good work. And so like creating an asynchronous space so that people can do that, right? So we definitely like we've tried like shout out channels or any other form where you can show appreciation to each other that replaces the in-person like, nod and high fives. And I think this next tip actually applies to things in general, even not remote teams. This is so much more important to keep your projects not to run super long. Like make sure you have quick wins along the way. If you have a really long project, make sure you have demoable milestones along the way where people can show their work. When possible, like asynchronously, perhaps you can do like a video demo and send it out, and people could, oh, that's what you're working on. That's so awesome. There's some interaction where they could like, engage with it. So I think that's super important. And so like, allow the team to celebrate and engage. In meetings, I think we kind of just talked about the when I saw the spin, I was so excited because like it is kind of a dread a lot of times in Zoom meetings where especially people are taking turns to do something. There's always that awkward silence. Even after a year, it still makes me cringe, like, oh no, who's next? So that like it took me a while to get used to, but like also depending on the person, some can bear that more than others. But I think what I've seen work so well in a year and a half of being remote is that make sure each meeting is prepared. If it is a deeper topic, send out like a doc so that people can do some pre-read so that they are like, informed enough to engage in that meeting. And also don't expect people to always read the doc. That's just most of the time people are busy. So, in the beginning of the meeting, what I've seen work really, really well is like someone will be like, did people get the chance to read the doc? We're only going to go through the comments. We're not going to read through the doc like line by line. And if it's crickets, then like, okay, let's just turn off the video, read in silence for 5-10 minutes, and then we're going to come back in 10 minutes and actually discuss the topic. Well, it was awkward the first 10 minutes, like it works because then people can actually talk about the things that need to talk about, and then information just flies through the meeting like super fast. So yeah, I think there's like, both like things that I haven't done before that I've seen work really well in a remote environment.
Mm-hmm. One thing I will add was, when you're talking about parties being really hard on Zoom, we had another panel a few months ago, and Harper Reed was saying how at the end of each Zoom meeting or certain team meetings, they'll have something they call a GIF off, where like someone will choose a topic and they'll do this like apples to apples type thing, where someone might say like, like cereal or something, and then everyone chooses a GIF that they think that person will choose that's related to the theme of cereal. And it's just something that's so, I love it because it's like, it's something that people look forward to, and it's something that you absolutely would not be able to do in person. So even finding the things that you can do virtually that you can't do in person, and not just like, I guess thinking, oh, Zoom is remote is always going to be harder in all these ways, because I think there are things that it opens up.
That's a great idea. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna steal that one.
Yeah. Any other things that have worked for people?
Yeah, I can concur that there is a bit of awkwardness that seems to be inherent with Zoom. And I personally am an awkward person, so it doesn't bother me as much, but I can feel like the collective awkwardness, which bothers me. So it's not, anyway. One thing though that I have read about recently and have been incorporating into my one-on-ones for a little while is like embracing awkwardness, like having silence be okay, bringing up topics that maybe neither one of us really want to talk about, but need to be discussed, even if it's not now, but at some point. And so I feel like in some ways, these Zoom meetings are creating a sense of intimacy that I normally would not have had, because I'm usually only comfortable being awkward around people that know how awkward I am naturally and don't mind it, if that makes sense. But folks that I've never met, like Jim was saying, now they know how much I enjoy awkwardness, and it's kind of brought us closer together. Another thing that was mentioned that I did not encounter until coming to PathStream was a planned silent time at the beginning of the meetings, or not always at the beginning, but there's a period of time that Jack usually just says, Jack is VP of engineering here. He usually just says, hey, we're going to make comments in the documents, and we'll have whole conversations. We're all just, it doesn't matter if your video is on or off. For the most part, people have their mic off. Sometimes I keep mine on because I have little giggles that I think add to the meeting. But then there's a point where we all come back together and then we have those discussions. We also do joint note-taking, which I think is good for engagement, which means that there's not one person taking notes. Everyone is engaged in it. And then we rotate who actually compiles those notes and sends it out to a notes server that also goes out to the whole company. So anytime we have like an engineering all hands or incident review or that type of thing, there's notes that are going to go out, and that responsibility rotates. Another thing.
What does joint note taking look like? Are you all in a collaborative doc together?
Yes. So we're in a Google Doc, and just say this is an incident review. It'll start off usually with 5 or 10 minutes where we're filling in, okay, this is what happened. This was the timing. This is some of the details. Everyone is collectively putting their information in about what happened for that incident. And then as we start discussing what are some things that we could have done differently, you have the sections like what went wrong, it's not one person taking notes. You can see 5, 6 different people just adding in what's being said and what's being discussed after that silent period.
Nice.
So yeah, that's the joint note taking. And then the last thing I'll say is I was introduced to, I'm going to put this in the chat, this lovely site that you can create a team, I guess, URL for. And whenever you have meetings, it integrates with, I think it's Slack. Yeah, you have to have Slack open, but it'll like give you noises, cheering, womp, womp, womp. That's one of my favorite ones. It just kind of gives some interaction. So it doesn't matter necessarily if someone is averse to having their video on or not, or actually turning on their microphone, they can participate and give feedback. So we use that a lot with like some of our, what do you call it? Team building times and presentations even. So yeah.
So cool. I definitely would love to check that out to add something to our meetings. I know everyone is not going to get a chance to speak for each topic. So we're going to keep going.
From the chat though, if anyone can speak to managing folks whose first language isn't English, I think that'd be interesting just on that team engagement question. And it sounds like we've got some attendees who that's top of mind for.
Oh yeah. Miriam, I think you've got some experience here.
So we have a fully distributed team, and at least 4 of the folks, as far as I know, English is not their first language on our team. So out of a team of 13, 4 people, English isn't their first language. I am formally an English as a second language instructor. I've taught at home and abroad, and it's one of the things that I love about my job right now. I am mentoring folks in like a vocational English setting where we're talking about technology. We're talking about how to give, reviews on PRs, grammar somewhat, but also a little nuance about how you would like to say things. Whenever you're giving your stand-up check-ins, even when they have like larger presentations, we'll go over it together and just work out, little kinks. I love it. I enjoy that part of my role. And we do have folks in other countries as well. I think the most important thing for me is having them and the whole team understand that communication and even listening is about how you convey a message. If your grammar is incorrect, if your pronunciation is incorrect, I don't care. I just want to understand what you're saying, right? For example, there might be a situation where a person has a pronunciation that's wrong, but after the first time I understand what they're saying, I'm not going to stop them and ask them to say it over. I know that for them, chat means chat. All right, let's move on. There is a level of intelligence that comes with being able to understand someone once you know what they're trying to say. So I think it's just really cool to have folks from different cultures and different backgrounds, religions, races, all that kind of stuff come together. And for any of us who are English speakers, we know how difficult it is to learn another language. So the fact that they have learned our language to the degree to be able to work together, I give them kudos, and we just make sure that the concepts and the understandings can be conveyed, and then we move on.
Just to add on to the 2 things. So one, Miriam talked about rotating the note-taking responsibility. We also rotate the facilitator responsibilities, and that forces the engagement because you know that at some point it's going to be U-turn and you're going to need to follow and so on. But also for non-native English speakers, that helps them. It can be hard, but they have to be in front and they get to practice at the frequency. I'm personally French, as you may hear it from my accent. I have like 2 or 3 other folks in my team that are French somehow, even though we are globally distributed. I lived in the US and in the American culture for 16 years. So I do a lot of coaching on communicating in an American way that is very different from the French way. It's 2 different angles. And one resource that really helped with this is a book called The Culture Map. And we did kind of a book club with the other leaders within infrastructure. And it really explains this on the spectrum of the different countries, how people communicate, react, provide feedback, and so on. And so raising awareness on the differences was really helpful. So I really recommend it. And then a lot of coaching and following up on conflicts and providing feedback and all of those things.
Nice. We have another question. I'm going to insert it here as a topic, but the question is from Kwong, who says, I'm finding as we shift back to normal, hybrid is a lot harder than fully remote. Any tips on working in a hybrid context and how to decrease the disadvantage of being the remote folks when half the company is back in person? I think this is a pretty big topic, but maybe we could help Kwong out just with a few things, and then also point to some other resources as well.
One of the things we talk a lot about with hybrid work is just kind of defaulting to digital. So essentially acting like everyone is still remote. And what that means is you're still doing note taking, you're still doing these facilitation, rotation procedures, you're doing all of these best practices as if everyone were remote, because that empowers people to be in the office on different days. Like even folks who are there may not be there on the same times. And you really just want to establish this foundation of communication and transparency, but also access to information. A lot of times what companies struggle with is like, cool, the information is all documented somewhere, but having kind of established norms about where it will be, and that within the first hour after the meeting, you'll be able to find the meeting notes. So really it's continuing a lot of the habits that you may have started to invest in remote. I think the challenge that can come up there is like folks in office are like, we're good. Like we don't need to do that. And so that can be helping to build alignment kind of at the more senior levels of, if we want to be successful as a hybrid company, one of our top line goals or OKRs needs to be around effective remote and distributed work. And that needs to be communicated from the top level, not just from remote teammates. And so if they're kind of supporting that, that's part of that alignment conversation and surfacing those challenges.
Yeah, I can go next. Definitely a big +1 on what Jen just said. Previously, before the pandemic, I did have part of the team remote, and they were the minority. Reality is, if the remote population of the company is the minority, it is going to be harder, and it absolutely need to start from the top. So one of the things that is really important to me to continue to be successful in a hybrid situation is that as a leader, you do have to, even if you are close to the office, like work partially remote, because until you do, you don't quite know what are the pain points that your remote workers are facing. Then you can pick and choose which problem you go solve. Another thing that I've done before when I had part of my team remote was making it very clear that making the whole team successful is the team's responsibility, not just a leader. Because a lot of the things that make everyone successful is in the day-to-day and the small things. Do you, send a message to someone on following up? Do you type up notes when you have a side conversation so that someone who wasn't there also have the context? Or when someone else who's remote is confused about something, do you take the time to make sure to explain? So those are the little things that's going to go a really long way. And just a leader isn't going to be enough. So really, communicating the expectation that everyone is in charge of making everyone else successful.
All right. One thing that I think can be challenging, going to talks and reading books and coming to these panels is it's easy to walk away with some ideas and inspiration, but not a ton of really tactical things to try. And we've already covered a lot of things that I'm excited to bring into Range's workspace, but I was hoping we could go around and just share, briefly share one unique habit that your team has during a cycle, whether that's a 2-week or 1-week sprint, or so that could be a meeting, a ritual, anything else that you think is maybe a little bit unique to your team that you really enjoy. All right, let's try the spinner for this one. And I'll do the pre-spinning so that it's a little bit more predictable. Good, we'll start with Jen.
Sorry, I was like, oh, but I'm not ready.
Usually in a meeting, if we had a little bit more time, I would give people 30 seconds I'd add a little timer and add 30 seconds, but I want to make sure we get everything.
I can go first.
All right, go first, Ellen. Thank you.
This may not be unique because I think this practice, a lot of teams practice this, but I think it's very important in the ritual is to I think every team's problems are going to be different. It's hard to say what works for one team is going to work for another. So to me, what's more important is to have a system that when problems happen, it gets surfaced quickly and it gets resolved quickly. And so that iterative approach is really going to either keep the team health steady or improve it if it's not at a desired level. So then the way that in my organization, how we do it is that we have retros and we're keeping the team accountable for taking action on retro items that service as could be improved. And I think that in itself really helps us. Each team does a little bit differently, but that's the right amount for the team, and there's autonomy within the team to make improvements.
Cool.
All right, I'm ready.
Jen, all right, we'll go back to you.
Two things kind of come to mind. One is we obviously use Range pretty religiously at Range. So we do, daily or kind of every few days a week check-ins. And those check-ins are kind of just about your work and what you're planning to do, what happened, and also about how you're feeling. And I think what's powerful there is this asynchronous foundation that we have about what's happening on the team, which then basically makes all of our other meetings just better because you're not trying to catch up and during your one-on-one on what someone is doing. You're not trying to micromanage by being like, hey, is that project done? And in the actual meetings that we do have, we can focus on things like just a pure game time where we just hang out and play games or a pure collaboration moment where we can work on something together versus the status update. And that's something that we have a lot of other teams do, but has been something we've really invested in.
Nassim?
Yeah, I guess for us, it would be more our approach to stand up. We did it in person when we were mostly based in the US and in Europe. Then we tried the Slack thing, but it was too short on context and very bullet point and not detailed enough. And then we hired someone in Australia, and that was impossible to meet all at once, and that was not fair, and so on. So now we do things in GitHub, all of our work. And so we use GitHub discussions. It's one of the features on GitHub. And we have a new topic every week. And every day we have a new comment. And everyone on the team goes and edit the comment with what they worked on, what they blocked on, and typical Summit stuff, but heavy on context, a lot of context. And what we found is when you come back from PTO and you just have one discussion to catch up on or two discussions, it's awesome. We no longer need to track down 10,000 GitHub issues. Everything is there. That's been extremely powerful so far.
Thanks. Miriam.
Yeah, I'm not sure, how unique this is, but one of the teams at PathStream has recently implemented a part of their Monday goal setting meeting where they actually talk about not task related or team deadline related goals. So more personal development goals. So it might be that I would like to chop up my PRs into smaller PRs and get 3 PRs out the door within a given time. And I guess that's still a little technical, but not really about the code or the feature that they're writing, but something around their own personal development that they're adding into that. And you could technically do that, with a remote team, a hybrid team, or an on-site team, but it is something that I think has been added recently that's given the team a little bit more insight into what everyone is how everyone is growing. So some of those things are things that you might normally talk to your manager about, but now your coworkers and the people on the team with you get an idea of where you're looking to grow.
Thanks. I'll share mine that Jen already mentioned, which is we have usually weekly, sometimes it's twice a week, social time. We just play games together. And I mean, we've discovered so many fun games, Draw Battle, Gardic Phone. Yesterday, we played this new one that we found called Virtual Vacation. I posted it in the chat, and you just get dropped somewhere and basically have the view of someone walking around for about 1 to 2 minutes. And then everyone has to choose where in the world, they have to drop a pin and choose where they think this is. And whoever is the closest by miles or kilometers wins that round. And then so then it keeps tracks over different rounds. And it's just so funny because it's people are kind of it's semi-collaborative because people are like, oh, I see a Vermont license plate or something, but also kind of trying to keep it to themselves because they want to win. But it was extremely fun. I think I'm gonna move one of these topics into the closing round. So we're actually gonna move on and then do a closing round afterwards. Let me just check. Jen said garlic phone, but it's Gartic phone.
Oh,
Okay, cool. So just as a quick side note, this panel is sponsored by Range. So before we move into a closing round with the panelists, I'm going to pass it over to Jen to share a little bit about Range. And I think she's going to actually share a sneak peek of something that we're launching next week that will really help managers and leads know what's going on with their remote teams. So let me stop my screen share so you can take over.
Awesome. Thanks, Jean. And if you haven't seen, my cat Rufio has joined. He's here to help with the demo.
I saw the door. I'm like, oh.
Yep, she joined the call. Thanks everybody for joining. I'll keep this short so we can get back to kind of all the wisdom from the panelists. As Jean mentioned, I'm one of the founders of Range. And if you haven't gotten the sense yet, Range helps teams run kind of their weekly processes. So if you're running asynchronous check-in kind of daily over a few days a week, you can do that within Range. You can facilitate a meeting using the tool that Jean has been using today. And next week, we are actually kind of launching a team dashboard where you can get insights about what your team is working on and how they're feeling. So as we've talked about today, one of the big struggles can be like, cool, at the high level, how are things going? Where do I need to focus my attention? Because as a manager, you're often split across many different work streams. So I'm gonna share my screen and we're demoing from our workspace. So, friend DA.
50-person friend DA.
Sweet. Did that come up for folks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sweet. So this is our established team, which is kind of our product dev team. And you can see, I can start off the day by getting a sense for how folks are feeling, kind of general mood. If anyone's not feeling well, I can tell my teammate Sean is probably having a headache today. I can also get a sense for the overall stress levels and presence in the virtual office, so to speak. So I can see that last week on our team, a few folks were kind of out, which is why we've got kind of more gray during the week. I can get a sense for folks for yellow moods more generally, probably a relatively stressful week for folks. And I think that's because people were in and out of the office. Whereas this week, we started off with a lot of green moods. So like, we're going strong, we're in a groove, like good to know if I need to toss an extra project the team's way, everyone's like feeling pretty comfortable. I also can get a sense for meeting load on the team, kind of how folks are collaborating, one-on-ones versus external or group. You can see, because this is product dev teams, there's not as many external meetings and the overall meeting load is a little bit lower. When I pull up our sales team or our senior leadership team, their meeting load gets a little higher, but this is looking pretty healthy for our product dev team. I can also go in and actually see kind of where folks are needing help, where they flagged like, hey, I'm going to be out, or here's a learning, or I'm blocked, and the kudos and thanks that are happening on the team. This gives me a good sense of like, hey, here's where people actually need my assistance amongst all the work that's happening. And the team knows that when they flag during a Range check-in, it's going to come in here and help them get attention on their work. I can also go down and see kind of some of the top items that the team is working on, whether that's the artifacts like GitHub PRs, Google Docs, and we use hashtags, just like you might on social media, to categorize work. So I can see activity summary, which is literally this page that we're looking at, is one of our big tags and the big projects that folks are working on. We're also a team that shares a lot about ourselves. So you can see personal as one of our top tags, which is a good sign that people actually feel comfortable kind of sharing their work with the team. So the way we use this dashboard is really to get kind of a high level sense for how a team's doing, figure out where I need to focus during the week or who might need help. And this will be launching next week and we'll be sharing that out with everybody. And we will also be sharing today a link for folks to sign up for Range. If you'd like to get a free month of our standard plan, we'll be dropping that in the chat in just a moment. And we'd love to have you kind of explore Range. And if you have any questions or find any bugs, just feel free to send me a message or reach out over intercom. We'd love to have you test out the product.
Cool. All right, let me reshare my meeting. All right, so let's move into a closing round. And I'm actually going to copy one of the other prompts here into the closing round. Instead of a piece of advice, because I think we have shared a lot of advice already. Maybe for the closing round, we could share any thoughts or predictions or dreams for the future of remote work. I think we're kind of in this like strange transitionary period, and maybe we all have some guesses as to what's going to happen. And let me just give us like 30 seconds to think about this. Just embrace this awkwardness. Cool. Nassim, you are up first.
Oh, great. I came from hybrid environment and then joined Elastic in a fully distributed environment because I couldn't take it anymore in hybrids. When to answer the question earlier, I was the only remote, and I had to foster that culture. And then COVID happened, and everybody was forced to be remote, and a lot of change happened in the right direction. Things I had been preaching forever, finally within my company, finally started to happen, and people were adopting it. I'm confident that this is going to continue the trend, and we're going to keep discovering the value of asynchronous work over synchronous work, the value of mind management instead of time management, and not tracking people from where they are, but really empowering them and trusting that they're going to go and do what's right because they are motivated for the right reasons. So that's my hope and prediction. Yeah, that's seriously my hope.
Jen, you're up.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm optimistic for is around just learning how to connect remotely better. I think it's always funny when people are like, I couldn't possibly feel connected without seeing people in person. And I'm like, do you chat with friends? Do you see all of your friends every day? They're like, some of them I haven't seen in 2 years, but I feel remarkably close to. And I'm like, yeah. So I'm excited for this kind of like next horizon on async and distributed team building and connection building and what that looks like, and kind of all the companies and innovation that happens there to bring people closer together without requiring us to be in the same place or even in the same time zone.
Ellen.
Yeah, well, my prediction is that there will be a lot more tools like Range and amongst others to make working remotely more joyful, and making like continue to invest in team cohesion. One of the things that I see being a challenge is a lot of times for companies, either they're dealing with this for the first time, or they don't have enough signal to understand what to invest in or what process to roll out. And I think like with more tools, that gives us more data to make these decisions. And my dream is that, the outcome I would really want for any teams that I'm part of is, the benefit of working remotely is you now have much more time to cater to your personal life, and instead of like being in the office, you can be perhaps closer to your family and doing things that that make your life better, and at the same time, like in office has that benefit of like closeness and togetherness. So my hope is, as we continue to progress in this remote world, that we take the best of both worlds. Both have more focus on like your personal life, and also at the same time have ways to continue to connect with your coworkers, and be stay productive and happy. So.
And then I'll go, and then Miriam. I think there's kind of like two extremes where we can go, and sometimes you see tools that are on a little bit closer to different extremes, but I think there's definitely the more dystopian, like, oh, everyone's remote, low trust, like how do we know if they're working if we don't see them sitting in a desk? And so I think that's the way of like monitoring, right? Like making sure people like the keyboard tracking, like really, really dystopian stuff. And I sincerely hope we don't go that way. I think, the future that Range wants and that I want and is one of like high trust, what Nassim talked about of like really high trust environments where you're not monitoring people of like how many hours they're working, but trusting that they'll get their work done. I sincerely hope that we head in that direction. I see that already. I also think that doing remote well can be more difficult, but in fact, it's actually fixing or addressing some of the issues that are in in-person workspaces that we just don't really talk about because or aren't felt as deeply because it's kind of good enough. Like you kind of get like enough information, even if some people are excluded, like being the only remote worker on a hybrid team, or if there's in groups in an office and you're not in that in group, like people are going out for lunch without you or having coffee without you, or there's kind of in office cliques. So I think doing remote really well can help address some of these issues and create cultures that are more inclusive, more connected, more intentional. So that's my hope. And Miriam.
I feel like everything's been said. I agree with what everyone is mentioning as far as hopes and aspirations. The only thing that I would add is kind of looking at it from like a higher point of view. We're leaving the information age and we're going into the experiential age. And I think that having more remote teams or remote friendly teams, I think there's going to be hybrids. There's some people who are still going to want to go into the office, some people who are going to be in the office, some and not, others. But as we enter into this experiential age, I feel that having that flexibility and those choices is going to allow us to experience life at a higher level. That's my optimistic view.
Thanks, Miriam. A few logistical notes before we close out. We'll be continuing this conversation with the Lead Time community. So if you aren't already part of the community, you can easily join. Someone will add a link to the chat. It's just leadtime.range.co. It's kind of a slower, there's a lot of like Slack, kind of like Eng manager places, which I think are super useful, but it can sometimes be overwhelming, especially if you just want to pop in every few weeks to see what's going on. So we created this community kind of as like a slower, more forum-like discussion place. So check that out. And then finally, we'll be running another panel in just a few weeks. It'll be about building resilient teams. And really, because of Thanksgiving and November, it's going to be around building resilient teams with an emphasis on how to cultivate a culture of like gratitude, reflection, celebration, because a lot of times we reserve like feedback and stuff for when things are going wrong. And so how do you flip that on its head and really get ahead of that and build resilient teams by building that kind of culture? So let me drop this link into the chat and wait, maybe someone already dropped it in. Okay. So if you are thinking of joining, go ahead and reserve your seat, and we'll also send out all this email and the notes from the Range meeting for this panel in a follow-up email today or tomorrow. So that's it. Thank you, everyone.